Hello and welcome to episode 68 of Shared Discovery, the show and podcast dedicated to sharing the many exciting, enjoyable aspects of games, gaming, and villainy. I'm your host, Victor, and today I'm joined by Ron. It's been a while, Ron. It's good to have you back in here. How have you been?
It's good to be back, Victor. I have been well, just watering the garden.
Nice. Watering the garden of life.
Of humanity, yeah.
Humanity, I dig it. We're going to talk a lot about humanity today. You brought this topic to me, so tell me about it. Tell them about it.
Oh, okay. So I brought this topic. This is being evil is fun. Being evil in video games.
Whoa.
Being video in games.
Oh, in video
evil
games.
in games.
Okay.
Yeah.
Scared me there.
Yeah, sorry, not in real life. Let's take a step back. This is a show about games and gaming,
yes.
And we're going to be talking about games and gaming and being evil in games and gaming.
And why are we talking about this?
Because I recently came to the realization that as I've been playing video games, there's a lot of them that have these evil paths or evil choices or evil ways to play them. And I was just sort of like, why? What's this about?
Yeah.
Why are there evil paths?
Why do these even exist, and why do people play them?
Exactly. Because don't people fundamentally want to do good things? Like, want to be good? Like, be the hero, right? Like, part of power fantasy is being the hero, saving the day.
Okay.
And, like, I guess...
not always, right?
What's the point? Yeah.
So what is drawing people to that? And what I really liked from our show prep, I wrote this down. This is what you said. Interrogating our desires to be evil video games. So we're going to take an inward look at why we, personally, have liked some of these evil video games. And we're going to come up with a hypothesis by the end of this.
And spoiler, I pretty much only ever play as a villain in video games. But we'll get to that in a bit. Okay. Interrogating our own video game play styles.
Okay, we'll see our playstyle biases here. Okay. All right, Ron. But it's been a couple months at this point. What you been up to? Yeah. What you been playing, right? Some of these evil games?
Man, have I ever. I've been diving in real deep into all things evil. I have been learning about...
Clip it.
History? Literally. Don't clip that, please, and use it against me somehow. But, it's really been indulgent, just really getting in there and playing all sorts of games that are based on being evil, have evil in them, and just sort of thinking about the human psychology behind being a bad guy, right? Just like, we all think being evil people are all crazy and psychos and sociopaths, and there's something wrong with them, right? But why is there so much evil in video games?
And there's a lot more nuance than that. But in our prep, we even talked about are all villains the Joker style? Is that what a villain means?
Right.
Can there be more nuance? Can they be
chaos,
more controlled and meticulous, right? And even in Joker's depictions, he hits all of those boxes depending on where he comes from.
Yeah, which depiction, right? Yeah. And that's another thing we'll get into as well, is sort of the different types of evil and the different expressions in games, and not all games sort of go full evil, if you will.
Interesting.
And really, that's sort of what I've been doing, is just absorbing myself in a lot of different games that express these morality systems. But what have you been up to, Victor?
We got a list of these games here, Ron. Have you been playing any of them on the list?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so we'll talk about it. We'll get to them. Cool. For me, I've been a villain too myself. I've been torturing myself.
Oh.
I've been doing a Pokemon challenge.
Flagellation.
Yep,
gotcha.
I'm going to make a video about it. I'm going to dip my toes into YouTube editing here soon, right? Yeah. Something beyond the podcast, but in Pokemon Legends Arceus, there's a research system where you go out and do a thing for, in your Pokedex, you go do a thing for a Pokemon. Go catch it a certain way, go feed it, right? Evolve it. Just figure out what this Pokemon's doing. Kind of like with animals, right? You want to watch them and study them.
Yeah. Research.
So I did the tutorial. I went to the starting area and I decided I'm not leaving until I can do absolutely everything I can do. Meaning using the glitches, going to the places I shouldn't be able to reach, not having a mount, and I'm getting pretty far. So there's about 80 that I have access to. I've completed about 50 of them. Now I'm getting down to like the real grindy ones, right? There are certain Pokemon that spawn every 20 minutes. There's only a single spawn, but I've never seen a challenge like this on YouTube or so. I want to do it. It's kind of like RuneScape.
I've been seeing a lot of these challenges going around too. These like really, really strict approaches to video games where complete this game without using any weapons or something along those lines. And I think people would eat it up.
Yeah, and what this came out of is when the game first came out, Sven and I, we played it the first night, and then she had to work. And she's like, just don't go past where I'm going. I'm like, all right, I'll stay in the starting area.
Okay.
So I played while she was at work, and I was like, what if I turn that into a whole thing? Because obviously I didn't finish it while she was at work.
Of course.
But I'm like, I'm gonna do it. And so I also, when you go back to town, the guy sees how many research tasks you complete, and he gives you money based on them. So I'm like, how much money will I get if I turn in everything at once, right? I'm pretty excited to see where that goes. But that's another video. So been a villain to myself, torturing myself, not allowing myself to enjoy other games. But I'm having fun. It's like kind of turn your brain off challenge,
Yes.
So. Ron, we got to do a little housekeeping, then we'll hop into the real topic. Go to Instagram, check us out there at Shared Discovery Show. We need to post more. We can work on that because we're going to start streaming soon.
Yes.
We're going to schedule that here in the next month. We're going to play some of these villain games. I think we're thinking about Tyranny.
Some of these villain games, some of these weird games, strange indie stuff that we've been talking about, right?
Burger King games.
Right? All of these really foundational, ideas.
Okay, what is a Burger King game foundational to, Ron?
Jank.
Okay.
Which is a genre in itself.
Capitalism.
We gotta have a whole episode about jank.
Jank, okay.
Capitalism, jank,
Okay.
all really important things in the world of video games, especially if you look at the international market, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Slav jank included.
Yep.
Yeah, Euro jank.
Okay.
Whole genres we get to talk about.
I've sent you some janky games on Steam. Like
Love them. Yeah.
They were $1, and it's like chicken.
Or Raft being a truly wonderful experience.
Dude, Raft is so relaxing. I'm like, there's no people. This is amazing. Dude, I'm into a Raft survival game episode.
Let's get it on the stream.
But yeah, you can watch these on YouTube too. I was just talking to Savannah before this about doing some more post-production, like getting some more visuals in here.
Yeah, Tyranny has a great trailer, so like getting some shots of that in there would have been great. But next time we'll get some good stuff going for y'all to.
And lastly, if you just want to listen to us, you can check us out on Spotify. You can leave comments and reviews and all that good stuff there, and you can email us directly at shareddiscoveryshow@gmail.com to tell us your favorite villain game. Like, who is your favorite villain? Let us know. We'd love to read it all.
Yeah, let's hear about it.
So, Ron, you already answered the intro question.
Yes.
Do you like playing as the bad guy in games? So, I guess we'll skip past. I guess we both kind of did, right?
Right.
I do. Not all the time. You do, but all the time.
All the time. Yes.
So, let's define a villain.
Exactly.
Right, like we keep saying it. What does it actually mean? But first, we have a disclaimer. What is that, Ron?
We don't condone the behaviors being expressed in these video games through these actions, through these mechanics and stuff. Like, we don't support like murder or war or vampires necessarily, like morally.
Yeah, I could see that. Not supporting vampires.
If they exist, I'm against them.
Sure. I have never heard a moral stance versus vampires, but I get it.
Right. Right. So it's there. We don't condone evil behaviors. Yes. We don't condone villainy. We don't condone violence.
This is in the digital medium.
Right.
Cool.
This is all for fun.
Yep.
Don't take it too serious.
Sure. So we'll get philosophical. We might joke like at the beginning there, but we might make a clip. But it's not real. These podcasts aren't real.
This is for fun.
It's for fun.
Let's keep it light. Let's keep going. What's next, Victor?
We got to define some stuff, Ron. And if we got to define evil, we got to define the opposite, which is good.
Good.
So found a couple of definitions there. So
yes.
Good is to be desired or approved of. Or in the case of this episode, I think this second one fits better. that which is morally right or righteous.
Righteous, dude.
Yeah, righteousness.
All right.
And
I
so-
can agree with that definition.
As we'll see, there's going to be the morality will change versus in the context. But if we use this as a lens, so we can look at a specific game and say, okay, what is the good within the context of the morality of this world? Because we know it's right, it's righteous within that. So what is bad, though? What's the opposite of that?
Bad is of poor quality, so that copper is bad, right? Low standard, not good, disappointing, or what is that? Unpleasant, causing difficulties or harm.
You just don't want it.
Bad.
Yeah. Okay, that's good and bad, but what's the difference between bad and evil? When does it jump to evil?
Right. That's when like morality comes in. Evil is immoral and profoundly immoral and wicked. So enjoying pain, things of that nature. Morally reprehensible, arising from actual or imputed bad character or conduct.
Okay. So bad, it's kind of like a degree.
Right.
Like bad's a nuisance, it's unpleasant. Then the evil, it rises to just irreprehensible. Is that the right one? Did I say that right?
Reprehensible.
Reprehensible. Like it just rises to the next level
Of course.
of terrible.
Right.
And so, again, within that definition, we have the moral implication, right?
Right.
Immoral. So we're going to have to look within the lens. What is moral and immoral is going to look very different depending on the game universe that we're in.
Right. The perspective, the lens we're looking through.
Yes.
Because we only have the perspective we're given in the game. So right off the bat, example would be, in my mind, Call of Duty. Like, sure, you're doing, like, murders and reprehensible killing and everything like that, but within the context of the game, you're the good guy, you're doing good things, you're advancing the cause of supposedly, like, righteous side, right?
Yes.
Righteous cause. So in that case, from that perspective, things can be like morally righteous, even if they're bad acting, right?
Yes. And this is the complexity we found as we were discussing this in our note-taking, right? Is that the lens is super important because that soldier in the Call of Duty, they're often going to have that lens that I'm doing what's good and my goals are just, right? I am more righteous and moral in my beliefs, right? Tweak the lens a little to not the main character, the people on the other side, they might fit that other's definition, immoral and wicked acts, right? But we're going to try to take the lens of the character that we're playing as.
Right, the intended experience.
Lens. Yes. Okay, so we have the good to evil spectrum. Okay, how does that fit in the definition of a villain?
How that fits in with the definition of a villain is villains will land somewhere on that spectrum of actions, whether they're selfish or not, evilness, arrogance, cruelty, cunning. All of these negative traits are then in characteristics, though some of them arguably can be seen as good, like ambition can be good or evil, so it can be applied to evil characters as well. Displaying immoral behavior that can oppose or pervert justice, and I think that's more important than like what actions is that the actions are actually perverting or opposing like the good or the just, the righteousness.
Okay, the established order within the world.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, and it's interesting what stands out to me there. It seems like a lot of it is personality, so there's like an arrogance about it, and then the intentionality is huge too within this definition.
It's like 3 parts.
Yes. So which we will get into a second, but I did also want to define antagonist because within writing and within media, antagonist is defined slightly different. People will use it interchangeably with villain, but antagonist is generally just a character that opposes the protagonist, right? So interestingly enough, in the games we're going to be talking about today, the antagonists are probably the hero.
One of my favorite examples of antagonists not being villains is like racing games or sports.
Interesting.
Where you're just playing against other people like yourself. there's no bad guys here. We're just having a game.
We're just playing a sport.
But you're antagonizing each other. You don't want the other team to win. You have
You're
to
the
defend.
main character. They're trying to stop you from your goal.
Bingo.
That's what an antagonist is. So
Bingo.
I just wanted to make some distinction there because
Yes.
when I was researching that, a lot of people were making that distinction. Like, be careful how you're using this term.
Right. It's very easy to mix them up and conflate them, but keeping those as separate is really important in your mind because someone can be an antagonist and evil, or they can be evil and not an antagonist, and these things can change throughout stories and sort of fluid ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. And you touched on this, the three levels of the three factors that contribute to this hero to villain axes that we found. And they're not perfect, right? But I did really like this. This came up on Reddit. I always forget the person's name, but it came from a Reddit post, and they said that an anti-villain is someone that has bad actions, good motives, but bad goals. So this axis becomes actions, motives, and goals to determine where a character sits between hero to villain, right? And so where does that leave a villain?
The villain is bad actions, bad motives, and bad goals. Just bad all around. Bad. There is no real redeeming qualities in a true villain. When you get into more redeeming qualities, that's where you get these other sorts of classifications, like the anti-villain and anti-hero.
So yeah, we take it to the other side, right? So you have the anti-hero, right, where they have bad action, but their motives and goals are good. They're pretty just in their mind, right? But then the hero, it's just the opposite of the good actions, good motives, good goals. And that's why you'll see in media a lot of times the villain will, in the final conflict or something, they'll put like a bystander, an innocent party in front of the hero, because they're going to do everything they can to not harm that person, because all of their actions are good.
Right. And they're true villains, so there's nothing they won't do.
It's like, whatever. I don't care if I'm using bystander, innocent parties, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a pretty good three factors that we'll refer to as we go through the episode as well.
And we have some more three factors to talk about.
We do have three. Three factors are good.
Yeah, there's a lot of definitions in this
All right.
episode that we got to get through first of all.
Yes.
Sorry about that, everybody.
Grab your suspenders.
Yeah, we got to build our groundwork.
Don't close yet. We're going to be talking, but we're going to be talking about Freud.
Freud, everyone's favorite psychologist, Freud.
Okay, he did some good things. We talked about this too. He did. Every theorist. Well, listen, I haven't read every. Okay, well, I can say that every theorist has their problems.
Yes,
but a lot of them have their strengths. And for Freud, a little bit of backstory on Freud. He is the one who gave a language to psychology. Before him, there wasn't any writing. It was all philosophy. So he gave us the language. He gave us the terms consciousness and things like that, right? And gave us a way to talk about psychology. And, later on, he got weird with it. But one of his actual most useful contributions was the id, ego, and the superego.
And why we're bringing these up right now is to address the whole why do we want to do villainy, right? We've defined villainy, we've defined all these terms, good, bad, evil, villain, antagonist, but why does anybody want to do it, right? The initial question, why do people do these things?
Because the id.
The id.
The instincts, right? So these three factors, the id, the ego, and the superego, are how people relate to the world, with their id being their internal instincts, their impulses, and their superego being the morality that counteracts that. So the ego sits in between those and says, okay, I hear your morals, I hear your id, impulses, now I'm going to weigh these and make my decisions. So as soon as I thought about the why of villains, I'm like, well, that's id. That's your instinct.
Right.
That's those impulsive thoughts of, I want to just turn the car off the road right now.
Right. So it's feeding impulses.
It's those impulses. So let's define this, right? So we'll go one by one. The id is the impulsive or unconscious part of the psyche. It responds directly and immediately. That's a huge part of it, is the immediacy of the basic urges, the needs, the desires.
That urge, that
I need to punch something. I need food. I need to do something.
The anger that springs out.
The emotions, right? Like that raw potential. And this is in the newborn child, right? The newborn child is all id. They don't have this rational part of their brain, that the ego, the superego. They're all impulses. Like, my temperature is bad, I cry. I'm hungry, I cry, right? They're all impulses. And then so the id engages in this primary thinking. It's primitive, it's irrational, it's illogical, fantasy-oriented. That could really fit in with what we're talking about today. And so this operates on what Freud called the pleasure principle, that every unconscious, wishful impulse should be satisfied immediately, regardless of the consequences. Think about that, regardless of the consequences. So if we strip away as functioning adults, right, if we strip away the ego, superego, most people are going to think someone that's functioning purely on id is going to think about that villain archetype, right?
Purely running on id.
Yep.
No morals, no good actions, no good motives, no good goals.
Okay, so how do we keep that in check, right? And that's the other layer of this, and this is why I thought this would make sense within the context of video games specifically, is this ego. It's the reality. So Freud's ego is the rational part of the psyche that mediates between the instinctual desires and the moral constraints of the superego. The ego is the only part of the conscious personality, right? The morality, the impulses happening just constantly. But you take that in consciously. And it's what the person is aware of and what they think of themselves and what they try to project to others. So okay.
It's the conscious mind.
Yeah, it's the conscious mind. And so the superego goes, that's bad, that's bad, that's bad, but you still want to do those things. You still want to drive the car off the road. Okay, well, how can I do that? I can play GTA.
I can take up off-roading as a hobby.
I can do martial arts.
Yeah.
Right? And so the id, it develops in infancy, and its goal is to satisfy the id's demands in a safe and socially acceptable way. Video games.
There we go. That's why do people want to do evil in games? It's a compromise between their own conscious and unconscious mind.
Exactly. I love that. I think we summarized the episode. Ready?
All right, time to leave. Yeah, we're at 37 minutes left. That was a record-breaking time. Speed run our own episode.
Hey, let's do it. Are those just shorts? YouTube shorts?
There you go. Yeah.
And so before we move on to the superego, I'll wrap this up quickly so we can get into some games. But
some juicy
so
games.
While the id operates on the pleasure principle, the superego operates on the reality principle, right? Both conscious and unconscious mind. How can I rationally, without consequence, integrate those things? So, superego, lastly, is morality. It allows a person to engage with the content because it's fantasy. Okay, so I know that morally this video game is okay.
It's not hurting anybody.
It's not hurting anyone. It's just fantasy. I'm not doing that myself. Okay, thank you, superego.
Yes.
So it incorporates the values and morals of the society that you grow in, and the ones that you've learned from your parents, things like that, and it develops between that 5 to 3 age. So by the time you're 5, you have all 3 of these, right?
Oh, man. Hit us with this quote you have at the end.
Yes. Okay. And I thought this really summarized the villain.
It's perfect. Right?
This is a quote directly from Freud, and it says, "The virtuous man contents himself with dreaming that which the wicked man does in actual life."
I never thought I'd agree with Freud more than I do right now.
Whoa, gotcha. Woohoo. Achievement unlocked.
You got me. I don't like this feeling.
Oh, what's happening?
I shouldn't like an Austrian man this much.
Right, man. Okay. And so I love this quote so much because it really, when we were thinking about the why, it was kind of like the light bulb moment, the eureka of like, okay, Freud gets it. This is the theory that really aligns with why we're...
Freud gets me, man.
He gets it. He gets villains. Is that because he was a villain? Well, time will tell.
I love having things in common with dead men too. It's always nice.
Interesting. That's always interesting, right? We all slept. Like we have so many things in common.
So many things in common.
We go to the bathroom. We eat food.
No.
And so the last thing,
Yeah.
the superego is seen as the purveyor of rewards, feelings of pride and satisfaction, and punishment, feelings of shame and guilt. So you're less likely to actually do the behaviors within the video games because of those punishments that come, and the consequences that could come from doing them in real life. But then you're rewarded by still getting the relief of the id from the feelings of satisfaction you get from the games.
Yeah, and those have come a little way since then, but that's pretty much the gist of it, and like the conscious, unconscious mind, and like feelings, and how those motivate us and drive us to do less risky behaviors.
Absolutely. So I'm not a wicked man, but I can dream about being a wicked man through this very first game, Overlord. Tell us about Overlord, Ron.
So Overlord is a 2007 like console game. I'm not sure if it was ever released for PC, but it's about being the bad guy, and it was my personal first encounter with being the bad guy in a video game, like consciously, like no, that's the point of the game is to do like bad guy stuff. You're the villain. You're leading an army of goblin-like minions across this 3D world to wreak havoc, destroy things, and defeat the good guys, which are just actually stand-ins for like the 7 deadly sins. And actually the evil path isn't actually the correct path. You actually want more of a good path, but it's still a little evil. So like tepid is how I would describe Overlord. Is not quite committing fully to its theme, but instead like playing at the edge of it. Like you can do evil, but not too evil.
Okay. Yeah, and it's very interesting. So this game kind of like, it took that morality trope from things like Fable, and it said, hey, you can either be evil or really evil.
Yeah, and it's like there is sort of a keeping track of it, the point system of what's good and what's evil, what's more evil than other things. And it just didn't seem to quite work in my mind, narratively, or it just seemed to just end with a whimper. I don't know. I felt like I wasn't rewarded for being evil. Maybe that's the point of the game, is being evil is not rewarding, so you shouldn't do it, right? But then why are you making a game about being evil if it's not
like
going
follow
to be
through,
right?
Have there be a satisfying conclusion.
Satisfying conclusion.
If your axis is evil versus really evil, let us be really evil.
Satisfy that Freudian, right? That Freudian that urge in the id. I want that satisfaction of total domination at the end, but it doesn't.
And I will say,
give you that.
for this game, a lot of the main character's motivations is revenge.
Yeah.
Right? Because he wants the Overlord. He wants to get revenge on the 7 heroes that slew his predecessors, right? And so the big motivation is revenge. That aligns very well with the id.
Exactly.
Right.
Revenge is never a good thing. It's always going to end with people dying. I mean, or their lives being ruined.
Yeah, right? And so that's a very internal, like, primal feeling of like, you make me mad, I need revenge, right? And he's taking it to that logical conclusion. So that fits in with our 3 I'm just going to keep this right here. That fits in like the actions: rallying a bunch of goblins to slay everyone I don't like, right? Bad motives, revenge, bad goals. I want to put myself in charge after they're all gone.
And as an example of a villainous game, sure, you're evil, but you're not incentivized to be like a villain, right? There's always some sort of morality in there where you're trying to be on the better side of that morality. And this is part of my theory of like villainy and morality in games. Anytime they try to quantify or measure how villainous you're being, it's just a failure of a concept, like as a game mechanic, as an idea. It just never seems to work in my mind.
It's really hard to simplify this because even with these criteria, we always ran into like, okay, well, what if we change the perspective? And then we look at the main character of Overlord. He's like, well, he could be more evil. Well, he's not that, like,
He's not
I've
that
seen
evil.
worse.
Right.
Right? And so it's really, really hard to quantify. And we'll see that in some of the games as we go forward, and as they have even more strict morality systems. But I wanted to start here because, like, pretty straightforward. They were trying to make a game where it is the villain, or evil, or really evil. And I forgot to say when we started this section that we're going to be talking about games first where you are the villain. And then we're going to be talking about a few games that allow you to choose the bad path, the villainous path.
Right. And how those sort of compare and contrast to each other in how evil you can be and how satisfying that may be, but to each their own, right? Yeah. We'll get to it.
And the last thing I would want to say here is I don't know, he seems kind of evil if he's not really doing much of his own work. Has a bunch of slaves, goblin slaves to do his work. That's pretty...
He's very villainous, but doesn't live up to his potential. Okay. Is what I would say.
Man, come get it together.
Get it together, Overlord. Come on.
All right, Ron, what do we want to talk about? What game do we want to talk about next?
So another good classic evil villainy game is Dungeon Keeper. This is like old, 1997.
Yeah.
From decades ago. Don't like that I'm able to say that. But hey, it is what it is.
We're here.
We're here. We're alive and we're living it. So Dungeon Keeper is a series of games where you are the bad guy keeping your dungeon up and running, luring heroes into the dungeon and various traps and monsters, killing them off, stealing their loot, equipment, all that sort of stuff to keep your dungeon running. Really solid, honest.
What I really like about the level of villainy in this game is not only are you trying to kill the villains, the heroes, you're always also trying to wipe out all the other villains.
Yeah, you want to be the best bad guy ever. I love that. That's full commitment.
That is the commitment we need in Overlord.
Yes. Yes. I want to be in Overlord. I want to be the Overlord. So give me some other, things to do besides...
let me conquer some other villainous characters.
Exactly.
Like, I am in charge.
All of the bosses,
Bend the knee.
All of the 7 heroes in Overlord have it coming. They deserve it.
Yes.
They deserve the revenge that they're getting. In Dungeon Keeper, none of these heroes deserve it, and that's why it's so satisfying.
Okay. So... slightly, it's justified. There's a slight righteousness in the Overlord getting his revenge.
Yeah.
They had it coming.
They had it coming because they're all based on the 7 deadly sins and have these aspects of them that are villainous in their own right. So, then it is kind of like Dungeon Keeper where you're taking out other villains, but they're just couched in their own image of heroes, really.
I thought in Overlord they...
Is it the 7 or is that the sequel that I'm thinking of?
It says defeat the 7 heroes.
Yeah, the 7
they're
heroes.
modeled after the deadly sin?
Each one of them is based on a 7 deadly sin.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And so that's another motivating factor to take them out. It is not the Overlord's motivation. His is pure revenge. Yeah. But there is further motivation there if you need it.
So they didn't want to fully commit. Like, they wanted it to be a little bit justified, not that evil, right?
Exactly.
Players aren't going to play this if they're if it's completely evil.
Whereas Dungeon Keeper is you are victimizing
Lean in.
Like the good guys.
Yeah.
Like innocence.
The good, the bad, I'm going to be in charge. Doesn't matter if you're innocent. Doesn't matter if it's justified. I'm wiping everyone out.
And that's the sort of villainy.
That's peak. We peaked in 1997.
Like, just close it down. No more video games, guys. We're done.
We didn't. No more villain video games.
No more villain. Except... They did make more. They made plenty more.
Yeah, they made a few more back then. The current iteration is a mobile game.
Yeah. It's...
Just move past. Don't touch it. Don't play
it. It's a travesty.
Play better games.
It's one of those loot box ones where you can't do anything unless you, pay for,
or you wait 48 hours.
Yes.
So... We peaked in 1997 with Dungeon Keeper, we'll say that.
Yeah.
Okay, Ron, this is a game. This next one is why we're doing this episode, I would argue.
Right.
And so I want to compare it to Dungeon Keeper, the evilness level. So you'll have to walk me through this, but tell me about Tyranny.
Tyranny was the inspiration for this episode, as I had been revisiting it recently. I had played it a few times before, but quit because it made me uncomfortable because I was weak.
Whoa.
I am no longer such a
Okay.
weak individual, so you should all be proud of
Steeled
me.
yourself.
Yes,
Okay.
steeled my resolve, and pushed through and realized it's a brilliant examination of evil.
Okay. Dang, that's saying something. Like, that's...
You-
heart rate's going up. This must be really evil.
You can debate one of the final bosses into becoming one of your minions.
Dang. Max charisma.
Right.
That's so cool.
It's just as you are trying to be the most villainous person
Wow.
in the world, or at least that is an objective in Tyranny,
Okay.
is being
That's one
evil.
of the option. Now, this kind of game, how many endings do you think? Is it like a
there's
diverse ending style game?
4 or so endings, but there's variations on each ending because
Nuance within it.
the entire basis of the game is finding your own way. It's choices, many choices layered upon each other, so no two playthroughs will ever be the same.
Oh, that's cool.
There's so many variations on the story. Just in the opening tutorial mechanic, but we'll talk about it. It's not really even a tutorial. It's like a story mechanic.
Yeah.
But it's an isometric, so it's an old school CRPG, but it's trying to address this idea of villainy that we saw in Overlord, where it's villainy, but it's sort of tepid and watered down.
Sure.
They wanted to make a video game that would explore tyranny and villainy and evil to its fullest potential.
All right, 211, like
To
max
11,
out. Okay.
all the way. We're going full hill. So we start the game in a world where evil is already won.
Okay.
99% of the world has been conquered by evil, and the conquest mode, which is a story choice driven beginning of the game, is the conquest of the last free people of the world.
Holdout.
The last holdout
Wow.
of good in the world. They're good. They're
Yeah.
just people. And you invade and conquer it, and then the game starts after conquest.
Interesting.
Right? So the conquest is a bunch of these initial decisions that shape and change the way the people live and exist in the world. The war crimes that you commit will have direct effects on the people you'll be talking to and interacting with through the rest of the story. So if you are a horrible person in the conquest mode, people will remember that, and they will talk to you like they're afraid of you. Or they will be angry at you because they've lost family members because of your decisions. Everything you do in the game has all these knock-on effects.
So within Tyranny, are there ways to have a quote-unquote good playthrough? Or does it really fit what Overlord was going with evil versus really evil?
So it does that evil versus really evil, and there is a good path.
There is a good path.
There is a good path, but it is so extremely hard as to be like completely deterring, and it's so hard to even find the path to get on it that it's almost as if it doesn't exist.
So this is where you were coming from with Overlord, of like the mechanics actively discourage heroism but reward the evilness.
Right, and it does it so subtly and so insidiously through the writing and the mechanics that you have no choice but to start doing evil acts and justifying them to yourself as being necessary or required. So there's two factions in the game that make up the big bad evil guys' armies. There's a red army and then there's this blue army. The blue army are the disfavored. They're all about order and militant power and prowess, and like this is what you think of as like probably like a really easy mindset to get into of just like might is right above all else, and that's one path through the game. Then there's the disfavored are the armored guys. I can't remember these guys. They're a horde. They're led by the speaker, I think. But anyway, they're a horde of people that follow a charismatic leader, and they're a horde, so they have no allegiances. They are created by the survivors from villages that they burn and destroy down. So everyone has this suicidal rage and hate, and it's very much might makes right, but in a like wrestling in the mud.
Talk about the id, right? Talk about
Yes.
that info. Like
Pure
they're pure
id.
on that rage and motion.
The disfavored
Yeah.
would probably be your super ego, whereas this faction, led by the speaker, is more of the id.
Okay.
Totally id unleashed.
Wow. Yeah, because I mean, if you think about it, if we go back to the reality principle of the ego, before their villages were raided, they were living within the reality principle and controlling their urges. Break it down, what else is there to live for?
Yeah, you make them turn on their family, and then they have nothing left to live for. They're reduced to just id.
Yeah.
And they will struggle and create ambition where there'd previously been none.
Interesting. And so I want to rewind a little bit here from what you said at the beginning. You ended up quitting this game.
Right, because it made me question my own personal
okay.
values.
Interesting.
Because the way the narrative just ropes you into finishing this conquest through one of these two groups of bad actors, they're not here to do good things. They're here to oppress and suppress and dominate these people. So what do you do when you are a person that's caught up in these factions, but you're trying to do good? And a lot of that trying to do good within the system drags you deeper into the system that you're fighting against. So the disfavored, the more you try to resist them, the more they'll like crack down on you and use their might is right mentality to keep you in line.
Subjugate you.
Right?
Yeah.
They'll use examples of discipline to keep you in line, to keep you fighting for the cause. And the leaders will bait you along, the leaders of these two factions will bait you along with their personal arguments as to why they're doing what's right.
Okay. So they went so in to the logical conclusion of villainy that it was too believable for yourself.
Right.
So what we're talking about why to play these villain games. What made you go back?
Essentially, I wanted to know why I was uncomfortable and why do people play evil and villainous characters in games, right? Why did I have such a visceral reaction to pixels and a story that is evil? Like, I am not evil, right? I'm just Ron. I'm just a dude chilling in Michigan or whatever, right? This isn't me. These actions aren't me, but that getting duped, getting tricked by this video game. It's a game. Like, it's not supposed to have such a grip, such a hold on me that it can trick me into doing things that are against what I wanted to be doing in the game, right? I wanted to find the good guys. I wanted to fight with the rebels in a guerrilla war against the evil, right? I wanted to suss them out or maybe do good within the system. But every time you try to make arguments for the good or try to make those arguments, they just make the arguments back as to why these are like necessary sacrifices or we don't have time for that right now. That's what it's about, is the time. We're on a mission. There's a time constraint. They'll use all of these other arguments, these very logical sounding arguments to undermine moral arguments.
Okay. So you had this fear like, that my superego, my morality is actually warping a little bit from this game.
Yeah, so this game is
becoming
affecting
more
me.
accepting of this, but then you're like, no, I want to go back and conquer this.
Explore that feeling.
Explore it and prove that I'm not like this.
Exactly.
Interesting.
It was set out to just, I was there, okay, I was just going to get the job done. I wasn't going to get caught up in all these horrible crimes and everything like that. I was just going to do what I was supposed to do there. And it kept dragging me down into these ideologies that I didn't support.
Very interesting. And so if we go back to the question of the episode of why, for you, for this game, it was, you were learning something about yourself.
Right.
Interesting. This one to me, this feels like the most believable form of villainy that we'll probably see today, where there isn't good, and to do good, you're just going to be crumpled up.
You're just going to be suffering the whole time.
Suffer the whole process.
Even when you're doing evil, when you're doing good, it's like psychic suffering, and that's why I think this didn't sell well, didn't do well at all, Like nobody plays it, nobody likes it.
It's too real.
It's like
there's
artsy,
yeah.
sure, but it's too real.
So if we go back to the why, there's got to be some form of comfort and some form of. I think there has to be a disconnect.
Yeah, I can't go too far.
Can't go too far, and Tyranny went too far, and it was seen in the sales.
But going too far, we'll talk about a little bit later because that's kind of not true when we look at some other games. Tyranny, I think why it goes too far is because it's so personal. It's an RPG. You are taking on the role of an individual in that world. You are, becoming so, involved in it, where you're absorbed into the game and you're playing as possibly yourself, right? So that when you're playing an RPG character, you want everything to turn out well. So that in Tyranny, when it starts tricking you into doing bad things and being evil, and it starts dragging you down, and you start to understand that premise, that individuals are easily influenced.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like if we're thinking about the why, one of the big reasons we found is this power fantasy. You want to express some power you don't have in real life. But in Tyranny, you're often reminded of powerlessness.
Exactly.
It's stripped away from you, and that's too real. Like, we're trying to escape a little. We're trying to be the overlord.
Right.
We're trying to stomp people out. We're trying to be the gangster in GTA, right? And Tyranny says, you want power, throw your morals away.
Throw your morals away. And then most of the endings are you just becoming the big bad guy.
That'd be interesting if they made a game to defeat who you became in Tyranny. And very interesting.
And it's set up for sequels, but we'll never get the sequels
because it didn't perform well.
Because it didn't do well.
Well, I mean, to their credit, they said they did what they
they
set
did
out
what
to
they
do.
set out to do.
They made the villain game. So, okay, we have it at an 11.
They did it a little too well.
Wow. Okay. Very interesting. We might have to stream this, or might have to do a whole Tyranny episode on some of the 4 endings. I think that'd be interesting.
Even if we just did the opening conquest, like I had you sit through and do that, like character creation conquest, I think it would be an incredibly rewarding experience.
I think so. Okay, Ron, you want to blow through some of these other games?
I'm kind of going to skip over a few too.
Sure.
Because, we understand that Plague Inc., you're the Plague, you're a bad guy, you're incorporeal, you're not really a person. Stubbs the zombie, you're a zombie, you do zombie things. Yep. Dead by Daylight is really cool, 2016.
This one's really interesting because it's an online asymmetrical multiplayer game where it's 5 players at a time, 4 are survivors, 1 is a famous horror villain. So Freddy Krueger, Jason, Michael Myers, and you have the powers of those horror villains, right? And so it's a really cool way to say, Freddy's really cool. Like, he has these awesome powers. I want to do that. It's really, and they're all powerful, right? They're horror villains for a reason, so they're very, very powerful. So you get to express that power fantasy
and this
through those characters.
That satisfying power fantasy expression that's not going to go too deep, like Tyranny, and make you question your morals and, oh, Lord, who am I?
No, there's this one lets you just scrap the morals, go dive right into the id and slash up some survivors.
Some college students, take them down. And, that's some good old wholesome fun in my mind. That's that, sure, it desensitizes you to violence, but it's, whatever. It's video game fun. It's that villainy that everybody loves.
Exactly.
It's kind of like Grand Theft Auto is the same thing.
Yep.
You're the bad guy. You do evil things. But I really want to talk about, these next couple of things here. This sort of idea. It's war games and strategy games. So think RimWorld is sort of a simulation strategy game, management game type of thing. These sandboxes, right, that have been coming out lately, indie or otherwise, sandboxes. And most of these lack those morality systems we've been talking about. A lot of games like Mass Effect, Fallout games, Fallout 3, Fable, they had these systems. And I personally think that the most evil you can get, even beyond Tyranny, Tyranny doesn't stand
Whoa.
like a candle in the wind.
It's a bold statement.
against simulation and war games and simulation war games in these like RimWorld, because they don't have those metrics. They allow people to do the most expedient and efficient paths of acquiring capital and value within a game, which is banal and boring. And that's the most evil things in the world, are the most banal, most boring, like paperwork type stuff ever. And that's like large scale warfare for nothing but like resources, right?
Yeah.
You're killing thousands of people, right, from a position of power where you don't have to be doing these things, right? In RimWorld, there's a whole like a mod for organ black market trading, and there's a lot of games that have that in there. Pathologic has like organ black markets involved, and there's a lot of these. They're not labeled evil. There's no morality in these systems to say what you're doing is wrong, because actually the mechanics incentivize you to indulge in these bad behaviors like war crimes and organ removal and trading, because it makes a bunch of money.
Yeah.
And what are the consequences? You're playing a video game, right? Like minimal consequences.
I mean, and if we go back to our 3 axes, actions, motives, goals, the game advertising might not sell these as you're playing the bad guy. It's just war. But like you just described, bad actions, bad motives, just resources, oil, bad goals, money.
And I think it's most genius when you do not have to interact with these systems, but they're there for you to interact with, and they're more efficient than, say, doing the good thing or the nice thing, which is not doing imperialism,
it's interesting. Like, you have these big game boards thinking about these strategy games. You move a piece over, the screen pops up, 2,000 soldiers dead, you got how much iron, right? Cool, moving on. That's our statistics.
I think that is the video game where you are doing the most evil, is where the death is becoming statistics. All of like civilizations are reduced to numbers, and you're just some god playing with these lives, right?
So this comes down to scale and intentionality.
Right.
Since this game doesn't have the intentionality, like at least when the game is you are intentionally playing as a villain, you're making that conscious choice.
Right.
And then the scale is so much higher on these war games. Interesting, though, the core question of why play the villain, I don't think a lot of people think the way that you and I are thinking right now about war games, playing as a villain. Haha, fun strategy game.
Right.
And so then what becomes the reason to play these war games? What is the reason for you?
Well, let's be real. Primitive acquisition is really fun.
Number go higher.
Go higher.
Okay.
Min-maxing.
Sure.
It's the same with like Diablo. Stats going up, right? I'm running a country. I want my stats to go up. How do I do that? Is I do a little bit of colonialism. What's wrong with that, right? I mean, my economy is booming. My people have chairs to sit on. Aren't their lives being improved? When you make an argument that by doing all of these horrendous crimes, I'm actually the good guy.
So that you're arguing that's pretty evil is in the manipulative aspect of the framing.
Yes.
Interesting.
In that you can realize that a lot of these things are heinous and horrendous, and like it's all about framing.
So right? when you get that, like I don't play much war games, but when you had that realization, does it change your enjoyment for the war games that way?
No.
Interesting.
Because it's fun being the bad guy.
Because it's fun. That's what we're talking about today. And it's very interesting, those games. I think there's a nuance there between the intentionality of really knowing that you're a bad person and strategy numbers fun. And so the core reasons that we've outlined today to play as the villain is this power fantasy. to do things you can't do in real life, which is a big reason across all video games, but specifically here, like I can't act on those really bad impulses. I can't go in GTA and just drive my car on the sidewalk, the busy sidewalk. Like I can't do that in real life. I can do that in GTA. Right. And then it's just that escapism, but like really the big reason is I think being able to get some relief and some expression for these darker sides.
Do the things that you can't do in real life. And just as an aside, my favorite like doing things that you can't do in real life is the incidental evil that you get from the war games and strategy games, right? It's like you may not be knowing that you're doing or conscious of evil, but like what you're doing is evil, and like the sandboxes and stuff. It's the incidental evil. I'm just making money, but I'm doing it by selling organs. Whoops. Can't be helped. It's a lot of fun, right? And I love that. I can't do those things in real life, nor would I ever want to. I don't want to indulge in a black
That's the
market organ
huge
trade.
thing too. Is like, I don't want to.
Oh, organs are gross and slimy.
And it's like I may want to do some bad. Like I might have these impulses, like these dreams or these daydreams.
Everyone
about
has the
bad
id.
things. We all have the id there, but most of the time our ids don't really even go that far.
No, they're
Like
pretty tame.
to this level, like. It's usually like that's why GTA I think is so successful because that's basically as far as most people's ids go.
Right. Your id is not desiring industrialized mass slaughter on like international scale, right? That's not like no. You play war games because you think uniforms are cool or something, right?
And that I think is the scariest part of all of this for me is like when the super ego becomes evil, I think that's much more evil than an it's evil would be. Right? Because then that means your morality is completely warped.
Exactly.
Because I think the crux of Freud is that the id isn't moral, it's just happening. It's just an impulse.
It's just impulses.
So that super ego is that morality that controls you. So when someone gets to that level, that industrial level, institutional level of evil acts, that I think is the scariest.
Yes, because then it's like almost like id unleashed. Like it's just total like
it's like
accrue to accrue, you know.
Okay, then because normally like I say I'm thinking about these war acts and my ego goes, maybe not, because my morality says, hey, that's bad. The super ego, don't do that. But for someone who can do that, their super ego says, go do it. And your ego's like, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, because prestige.
That is a level that I don't want to get to, and it's scary that there are people there.
Right.
Wow, we got somewhere today, Ron.
We got somewhere, Victor. We got somewhere.
Okay, Ron.
Let's wrap it up.
We didn't really talk about the villainous paths, but I think the conversation was
Touched
still
on
good.
it.
We touched on it a little, right? Like the infamous, the Baldur's Gate. Oh, Knights of the Republic.
That was
the Old Republic. That's a good one. Fallout games like that.
It's where you can choose to be a bad guy.
I think those games, if we would look at the sales, those are just going to be more successful just purely for the choice. For the people that want to play as the villains, for the people that don't want to express that.
It's a yes and situation.
Yes and. So, I mean, Baldur's Gate's one of the best-selling games ever. So, just the expression. But I think we probably answered this, but I do have an outro question for you, Ron.
What is it, Victor?
Is a villain inherently evil? Maybe we didn't answer. That's a complicated question. I think that's like like a philosophy thesis, right?
Yeah, we might have to do another episode just to answer that question.
That's a deep one.
Okay, so nice. We got
Okay. Yes or no?
Yes.
Go. Yes. Inherently evil, based on what we outlined today.
Villains are
There has to be some evil present.
inherently evil. Bad guys, not always.
Not
Antagonists, not always.
Not always.
Villains, always.
Well, always. Okay.
But they don't always antagonize.
Now, morally, can a person be evil, or is the acts just evil? Does that go to the anti-hero axis?
Anti-hero.
Okay. Whew, the good episode, good topic.
Yeah.
Bring me some of these somewhere.
Yeah.
If you have some questions, you have some feedback for us, you want to tell us all of you, like you did a philosophy paper on evil, and villains, let us know. Let's read it. That'd be
I'll
awesome.
read it.
You can do that at shareddiscoveryshow@gmail.com. We're gonna work on doing some post-production on these, getting some visuals for the games we talked about. So check that out on YouTube and Instagram. We're gonna be posting about our streaming schedule. I think that is a great idea to do the opening of Tyranny and that conquest board, so you can see me struggle with the decisions. But that's the end of episode 68. Nice work, Ron. That's good stuff. So if you, just thanks for joining us. Have fun, be kind to others, play some games, and take it away, Ron.
Riches must be divided, but real wealth can be shared. Bye.
Bye.